We're going to start this off on the map Acropolis. This is Stats versus Serral, a fight to see who will go on and face off against time. In the upper left, in the red, from Korea, our Protoss player. He is
Slice Stats.
in the bottom right, our Zerg player from Finland. He is
Serral.
So this is where the journey starts for this Finnish man, our reigning world champion of Starcraft 2. His path to going back-to-back starts here against the opponent that once again he's 0-2 against in this year. Last year they met twice in 2 finals and Serral won both of them. This year they met twice and Stats was able to win both encounters, 1-2-0 and 1-3-2. So that already makes this a very spicy matchup on paper.
I'm very curious to see what kind of approach Stats is going to have coming into this. He's a player that really knows how to prepare. He's been one of the greatest players in StarCraft 2 for some time now, but of course not unique to people going up against Serral. Serral always seems to come out on top, but I think this might be still a very tough match for Serral coming into this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the stats here on screen don't lie either. Historically, very even between these two, 10 apiece. What I'm curious about is if Stats is going to do some of that triple Oracle opening that we've seen from him in the past. As we have a couple of beautiful cheerfuls in the audience as well. I mean, Stats, his Oracle control is just, it's the best. It really is. Together, I mean, maybe with some of the other Koreans, but it's unreal. And in general, Serral doesn't really get to practice against Protoss players who control their Oracles, as well as somebody like Stats. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, he's going to start things off interesting
looks like
over
we
here.
should have a Stargate here.
Absolutely.
Being planted down. This is in the bottom left corner of the map here. So I'm assuming this is going to have Oracles directed towards the main here.
Now, if you guys wonder why would you proxy it this early on, it's really funny because StarCraft 2 is so mapped out, right? For players like Serral, they know exactly when they're supposed to get their Spore Crawler. So when that Oracle makes his way from the left top side to the right bottom side, that's when the Spore Crawlers finish up. Like, it's a matter of seconds in general. If you proxy that Stargate, that first Oracle suddenly shows up so much quicker that there is a really good chance the Spore Crawler is not done yet, and that first Oracle can get quite some damage done.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, you can basically, a lot of times at the very highest level, just follow the clock. They're going to know exactly that right moment. So getting that Oracle in there, you might be able to snipe off 2 or 3 additional drones, which at this level of play is huge. Now, keep in mind that this is not uncommon. So we do have to wonder if Serral may even expect a proxy or something like that. We have the Overlord now coming into the natural here.
Yeah, it's not an Overlord speed opening, so this is actually going to make it very, very hard for Serral to figure this out. I don't think he's really going to get any links out there, because there's this and that adept here, and unless you have link speed, you don't really want past that adept. So I really think this is going to go completely undetected. And then the big question is, how many drones will Stats get with his first Oracle? There is the first Spore Crawler going up already, and it's in the main base, so that's good news for Serral.
Yeah, here comes that Oracle now, barreling towards the main. And we have the 2 adepts coming in here. This is to one-shot drones, which he's going to do immediately. And these kills are really going to start stacking up.
Yep, this is going to hurt quite a bit. I expected more, actually. I think all things considered, Serral handled this quite well with the 2 adepts as well showing up in the natural. I thought this could very well have been 8 or 9 drones going down this quickly. I think 5 drones for 2 adepts going down and a lot of damage on this Oracle. I don't think this is that bad for Serral.
Oh, good scout, by the way. Sending those lings down there. He sees the second Oracle merging with the first, so now he knows probably where he's going to need to defend. I believe those are actually going into the main now. Yes, they are. Keep in mind, wow, very fast reactions there from Serral. With 2 Oracles, you could, of course, one-shot drones, which is very difficult for the Zerg to deal with. But, again, Serral with very quick reactions so far.
Yep, and this is, of course, the downside of proxying your Stargate. There's a very good chance that it's going to get unpowered eventually. Now, the good news for Stats is that he was able to squeeze out 1 Phoenix. So this 1 Phoenix is able to hunt down Overlords and at least make it a little bit harder for Serral to figure out what's happening in the main base. Stats is going up to 3 bases behind all of this, so it's nothing too crazy. It's just a feisty opening, but in the end, this is all starting to look somewhat normal. And the things that we expect in a ZVP.
Yeah, getting these Oracles like this, it's very easy to defend your third, especially from Lings, since the Oracles just gun them down so quickly. We have the Forge now coming down as well, and the Citadel too. So we're going to see the Protoss continue to tech up. Now, even though I think he could have gotten more drones, as you were saying, Rotterdam, I certainly wouldn't consider that attack with the Adepts and the Oracles a failure. I think he did hurt Serral a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was all right. You know, sometimes in StarCraft, it's not good, it's not bad, it's alright, and this is kind of what it was. Alright, you know, I can live with it. Was hoping for more, but at least it wasn't a disaster. He didn't lose the Oracle, for instance. Like, that would have been a lot worse. So it's just a very playable game from this point on. Both players quite even. Serral starting to make quite a few units here. Maybe a tiny bit worried about this little move out from Stats.
Yeah.
But I don't really think that Stats wants to get too feisty with this at all, because it's just a couple sentries.
Yeah, well, Protoss can always recall as well here, so you might as well try to put a little bit of pressure on them, and if you need to escape, you can do that pretty easily with those sentries. So the two Phoenixes now are going to comb through all of the expansions that Serral has here, as Stats is trying to figure out what exactly is going to be the tech pattern, and how does he react to that.
Yeah, this is one of these moments where it's hard for Zerg to figure out, is it safe to build extra workers right now? Serral would love to have a slightly better economy than he currently does. That's why he fired up those 7 additional drones, starting +1 now as well. So it feels like Serral is gearing up for maybe eventually a lot of Roaches, Ravagers, and a couple of Banelings, as there we do have our Baneling nests as well. But it's going to take a while before these upgrades come into play. Now, we do know that Stats in general in this matchup loves to move out to cancel a fourth base, but that's just not an option right now.
Yeah, he's going to have to wait a little bit longer here. Again, another scout here just trying to confirm exactly what Serral's doing. Is he making an army? If so, how much and what of? In this case, it's going to be a lot of Roaches here, but not committed to that. He's actually still going to continue to drone up at the same time. So we might have a little bit of time here before we have any action. The Warp Prism is coming out, which is going to be used to try to, if it's not going to be used to harass, then used to push in and reinforce.
I like how he's keeping those High Templars in their simple form before merging them into Archons. But he doesn't even have Storms, so now he does get those Archons. 3 cannons, a battery. This gives us the idea with the 4 extra gates as well, that Stats actually wants to do more than just move out here. This is where he's like, all right, I don't want to be warping units at home if you counterattack. No, I really want to focus on my attack. Serral at this point is at 79 workers, so he's really not interested in building more workers. He wants to build up an army, as we do have a Baneling drop heading towards the third base of Stats as well.
Yeah, let's see if this drop can actually get any connections off over here. Is Stats going to see this in time? I don't see any probes being pulled just yet, and it looks like these Banelings are going to unload right over here, really damaging the economy here of Stats.
Yeah, 9 probes, while these Lings didn't even, excuse me, these Banes didn't even have +2, only having +1. That's not bad at all. Serral has started up the Hive Tech as the Infestation Pit finished up, and now we do see that Spire going down as well. Maybe this Bane drop scared Stats a little bit, because Stats now is moving back. And I guess he has Storm as well on the way, so I guess you don't really want to commit to anything too crazy as a Protoss player while you're teching up to Storm.
Yeah, I think getting that fourth base is a good idea. Just take it easy. Stats is certainly a player who's comfortable taking this out to the longest point as in a tech tree here in a ZVP. But again, a lot of Zerg players, you know, they seem to really not struggle in late game against Protoss. A lot of Protoss have tried to...
That's such a sweet way to put it, Tasteless.
I'm sugarcoating that one. Yeah, Zerg is incredibly strong in the late game, so I'm curious to see how Stats is going to handle, among all players, Serral here.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of pre-Broodlords timings, right? Or maybe a way for Stats to get in a very good shape before a lot of Broodlords are out. These Zealots are getting at least 1 Queen, and both Queens actually will get picked up, and now the Banes are going to try to roll in one more time as well. This time Stats is paying attention. Like, I still think that Protoss has a lot of opportunities to attack with the Archon, Storm, Immortals, and then, like, let's say you do an insane amount of damage, but you don't exactly kill the Zerg, then you can always follow it up with a Tempest or 2, or maybe even a couple of carriers. It's just, in general, you don't want to sit back forever, right? Because if you want to sit back forever, Zerg is like, all right, let's do it, let's actually sit back forever. We're going to get a lot of spores, a lot of infestors down the line, and that's where things can get a little bit dicey for the Protoss.
The Warp Prism is still roaming down here at the bottom. I don't think it's going to do too much damage, but this Baneling drop very well may. He's coming in now, and these probes again have not been pulled. Okay, 3 probes. Not ideal, but that's an acceptable number to lose here. Now the Overlord coming towards the natural. The 2 Banelings have been dropped out, but I think this is only going to get about, oh wow, 4 kills. Nicely done.
Yeah, 4 kills in total. It's going to be a lot more impactful by the time that +2 finishes up, because the moment you get +2 melee, then these Banelings are going to one-shot Walkers, and that's where they become a lot more devastating. But these are not massive commitments by Serral. Serral's actually quite rich, he's maxed out, so it's totally okay to throw away a couple Banes and see if you can get something out of it. Stats is going into triple Stargate, +1 air weapons already, and I'm always a big fan of Protoss players that get +1 air weapons quickly. His army is not that big right now, but I guess he just feels confident enough with the cannons and the batteries and the amount of storms that he has available.
Serral's going to attack at 2 different locations right now. We have these Lings and Banelings coming over towards where the probes are. The Archons that are morphing are actually getting in the way here. It looks like a lot of these Archons are going to be taking out the probes in the corner here. They could get up getting executed if they get close enough.
Oh my god, if +2 finishes up, he kills so much more. That was like 0.1 second away from finishing up. But his fort base is actually quite exposed. Good storm there though, a really good force field as well by Stats. So Stats weathers the storm, he survives, and he fires up the mothership. Alrighty.
So we have a lot of Broodlords coming in here as we're getting to endgame PvZ. Tempest on the other side of the map here as we're going to end up in an air arms race. This is getting very interesting. We do need to continue to watch here and see if Serral's Banelings can continue to connect with probes, because right now that's the tactic he's been going for, is to continue to stifle the economic growth here. Here we go again.
Yep,
they're coming in now. Is Stats watching?
+2 this time is done. +2 is done. So that means that these probes are going to get one-shotted. Whoa, that was risky. These Banes will not stop.
Good save there. I got really worried there when he split the probes in the opposite direction, but it looks like he's okay. For the time being, though, I have to imagine we're going to continue to see Banelings get sent through into worker lines, whether that's in the 4th base or the 3rd base of Stats.
Yeah, Serral's obviously enjoying this as he's sitting on quite a bit of money and he's maxed out at this point. Like, I like getting Tempest against Broodlords, obviously, because Tempest deal a lot of damage. The problem is, this army is not that great against Infested Terrans. You're going to trade Storm for Infested Terrans. You're going to run out of Storm energy very quickly. And there is nothing that's very good in the army of Stats right now against Corruptors. So if Serral actually starts getting a couple of Corruptors in the mix as well, I just don't really see a good way for Stats to deal with that.
We have a Nidus coming up now. Serral is very good at utilizing the Nidus in the late game. One burden right now for the Protoss is that with these Tempests out, and of course Protoss ground armies generally speaking they're not that nimble. It's hard to really move all around the map with them. Well, Tempests only amplify that. And so using a Nidus, let's say Stats tries to push, which is what it appears he's doing right now, a Nidus popping up could force this army to recall back. Or really cause a huge problem in massive counterattack. Here we go. It's starting now.
Yeah, that's going to be really annoying. A couple of Stalkers were left behind, actually, and these 3 Stalkers should be able to take care of this Nidus network. Like, this army that Stats has here is pretty terrifying. However, if it doesn't go well for him, he's going to be stuck on pretty much nothing for a long time. He's got a lot of Storms available on those 6 High Templars. This is going to be a really interesting fight. Those Tempests are getting in range of the Broodlords and getting a couple of very good shots off.
Okay, these Tempests are continuing to chuck out these shots and doing a lot of damage over here. We're going to see if Serral can engage. You can see he occasionally tosses out these Fungals, which catch small numbers of the units, but the counterplay here is for the Oracles to tag the Zerg's army so you can preempt that and try to move out of the way.
Neuroparasite is done, so Stats has to be very, very careful.
He's now going to come in here. We have Fungals coming down. Great Neuroparasites here as Stats is beginning to get pushed back. The Archons are doing so much damage to the air units, and now he pulls those back in here and executes them. Excellent attack here by Serral.
Yeah, and this is really not working out for Stats because he used a lot of the energy on the High Templars as well, and that means he has less and less Storm available. And if he's running out of Storms, he simply doesn't have a good answer against Infested Terrans at all. There are no Disruptors in the mix here. I mean, maybe if the Archons can get the best shots up, but there is a good chance that those will get this, or Neuroparasited as well. Then we do have our Robo base, so maybe he's going to add a couple of those Disruptors that I just mentioned, but that did not go well for Stats at all.
Stats is continuing to try to get in here, but so far it's not really been cost efficient. Keep in mind that the fights they're having are actually over spore colonies, so there's not a very significant area that Stats is able to dominate or eliminate, remove from Serral here. So Serral's continuing to grow. And this army, which is pretty slow here from Stats, is allowing Serral to then expand elsewhere on the map. Wherever Stats is pushing, Serral can try to consume parts of the map elsewhere.
I like how we're getting Blink now as well, by the way, and
Yeah.
a few more gateways.
Might as well.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where maybe if they can have a fight that is somewhat close, if Stats can then bring a War Prism and immediately reinforce with like 30-40 supply, then getting a couple of Blink Stalkers could be very useful to blink underneath those Broodlords and potentially snipe them, because that's the main strength of Serral's army. If the Broods are gone, the rest is very, very killable. It's just how do you get in range of those Broodlords?
Here we go again. Remember, at this phase of the game, the Banelings do one-shot probes. Good pull away there, though. And we have another Nidus network coming in here. I don't know if Stats has actually seen this just yet. I think he can just, yeah, he can just barely get out enough, and
What?
he did not see it. He wasn't targeting it. So the AI just shot down the cannons.
Oh my goodness, I cannot
I'm
believe.
sorry, the cannons shot down the Lings. It didn't target the Nidus, excuse me.
How did that happen? And if this happens again in the natural, that's going to be really annoying, because you really don't want to be losing your infrastructure here as a Protoss. We do see Stats adding the first Disruptors. I am a very big fan of that against the Infested Terrans, but I also kind of feel like having just Tempest is really the right choice. Like, I'm a big fan of Carriers personally, and it's hard, of course, fighting the Infested Terrans, but I think Carriers just work so well together with Disruptors. Tempest, I always feel a little bit squishy to me.
Yeah, so far, we really are not seeing a dent get made in Serral here. He's definitely playing this for the long game. Keep in mind, they're both banking up a tremendous amount of gas, but when we have the next big exchange, that should plummet back down, and the fights are going to be even more important for who comes out on top then. Another Nidus over here at about maybe 11 o'clock, and we'll see if that can actually come in here and hit that base. I think that Stats is going to have a very difficult time maintaining 5 bases if he can keep that up.
Yep, like you said, his army is quite slow, right? His army is slow and immobile and does best when everything is together. This is not a Protoss army that's quite good if you split things up. Like, no, the Tempests are good if they're protected, but they need to be protected by everything else. So it's really hard to deal with the mobility. A couple of neuroparasites do land, and I believe that he just, that's actually really funny, he used the Revelation on the Protoss army. So Serral giving Stats a taste of his own medicine is like, how do you like it if I see where your army moves all the time?
We were talking about how Stats' army is slow and it's hard to get around with. The same is true for the Infestor Broodlord, but they by themselves can defend and attack if Stats comes at him. Meanwhile, the Niduses that can send the Zerglings out, or the Banelings that can be thrown into the mineral patches, are really giving Stats a hard time.
I wonder if those were burrowed Banelings or burrowed Zerglings. I'm not sure what it was exactly, but it's kind of cool. We see everything being used. Stats is getting multiple Disruptors. Big fan.
Oh my god, so sick. He's so good.
Yeah, he does it again. He neuroparasites one of the Oracles, reveals the army. No, Stats, you gotta get out of here, I feel. This is really not a fight that I'm a fan of at all. I don't like where this is going. He's trying to run, but it's not going well. Now the Mothership gets abducted as well, or at least neural. This was bad. This was very painful for Stats.
Roddy, man, you know, the Zerg abilities are already good, but when the Zerg have the Protoss abilities too, it gets even worse. That was a great tag on that army. That makes it much easier for you to use your Infestors later on if you can simply see the movement of the Protoss' army. And this is something that can get cyclical over time, because the first time you tag the army makes it easy to then get the Oracle the next time and tag it again. So Stats is in a pretty perilous position right now.
No, that's absolutely spot on. I think the first Revelation really helped with the second. And obviously, I mean, the Mothership is supposed to cloak everything and make it so hard for the Infestors to figure out where the High Templars are. Well, if the entire army has been revelated, it's not that hard anymore. You know exactly where those High Templars are. Stats is once again getting a little bit adventurous. What I find crazy is that he's got like 6 Disruptors, but I only see 1 with his army.
Oh, that's funny. He goes into the cannon first. There's a chance that won't be remade, which might make these Banelings coming in there effective later on. In fact, I think he broed those Banes. Meanwhile, we have another huge attack. Fungal's coming down. And by the way, the creep, still enough creep over here to try to take this fight. And he's eliminating these high gas cost units.
Yep.
Look at the gas at the bottom of the screen, guys. Remember that Serral was floating about 2k gas earlier? So was Stats, but so many Archons and Tempests have been killed off. Now it's down to about 500.
Yep.
And this is where, if we continue to see these trades happen the same way they're happening right now, it's going to get worse and worse for the Protoss player.
Yeah, and this is where the Baneling run-by is hurt a lot more as well, right? He's having to pull his workers over and over again. Now we do finally have multiple Disruptors showing up in this fight as the Observers actually go down there. And that Purification Nova will completely whiff. it just kind of feels like Stats' army is only good from a distance, right? It's really not an army that can stand there and fight. Like, no, he's kind of hoping to land a couple of good shots with his Disruptors and Storm, and then from far away, kind of tickles Serral a little bit with these Tempests. But the moment that Serral actually collapses on this army and forces a fight, I really don't think Stats is going to do very well.
As you can see now, another great fungal over there. The Infestors might come back in for another dive. The Broodlords still able to chuck out these Broodlings. I guess they are getting pushed away slightly, but not enough. Oh my god, all the Tempests have been destroyed. Oh, we're just catching the tail end of this attack too. All these probes getting killed off again. Too difficult to maintain 5 bases here for Stats.
Yep, I mean, this actually truly hurts because the fight wasn't that bad until the very end. But now the Stalkers go down, 27 probes go down, the Nexus goes down, and it seems like Stats had enough. So Stats is going to try to win the game with this army. Don't forget, these Stalkers do have Blink, so maybe there is a chance of a miraculous Blink underneath the Broodlords. He tries, but there are still a couple of Infestors to save the day.
Great fungal here on top of these Stalkers. The Broodlings are just enough that I don't think that Stats can advance any further here. Now, although Stats took out this position, we can see it's already mined out. It's insignificant. He's going to try to push further into the south here, but I think the Broodlord count, might be high enough. He has to think twice.
Stalkers getting one more Broodlord there. This is actually getting a little bit scary for Serral as well, who's only at 56 drones. Losing this base is painful. If he loses the next one as well at 6 o'clock, then it becomes really painful. Getting the Prism would be nice, and yes, he does steal the Prism.
Oh, that's so sick. Oh. Not for long, though. Would have been nice if he could have pulled that back in. But another Blink underneath here. Again, the fungal combined with the Broodlings, though, is very strong against these Stalkers. The Archons are too clunky. It's too difficult to ever get them directly underneath the Broodlords if the Broodlings can get in the way, as we're already seeing right here.
As soon as there's a couple of Broodlings on the ground, it just makes it so hard for these Archons to get where they want to be. And obviously, every second that goes by is a very good second for the reigning world champ, because he is still mining more and his army is bigger. Stats wants to take out this base, and Serral, most likely, he really wants to save it.
I think he's going to try to come down here and close in on this army. The 4th base, by the way, for Stats is about to fall as well. That's going to put him on 3 bases. GG. Serral takes game number 1 in just an incredible exhibition of the power of late-game Zerg when played perfectly.
Kind of felt like they were both testing the waters there a little bit, right? Serral was not too eager to commit anything early game or mid game, and Stats, even though it felt like maybe there was a moment to move out with that army, he's like, no, I'm actually gonna go into my triple Stargate Tempest before we truly ever fight. And it turned out that in the end, perhaps it wasn't the right choice. I mean, he got close, right? He got a scary army, and he was posturing and flexing his muscles a little bit in the middle of the map. But I think Serral did a really good job with those Baneling run-bys. It's kind of never really allowing Stats to have all the freedom he wanted.
Yeah, I think we might have to see Stats really alter the way he's approaching the matchup here. I don't think that you want to play a passive game when going up against someone as good as Serral. And also Zerg in general. I mean, Infestor Broodlord is just really, it's really strong. So I think he needs to do a timing attack. I mean, I know he proxied an Oracle there, but I don't really count that as any kind of special timing attack. I'm talking about something where he tries to end the game before a late game can really start.
Yeah, like I think if you go back to some of the series that these two had earlier this year, I think Stats had a lot of success with canceling the 4th base of Serral. So if something like that could happen in some of these games, then there is a much bigger chance that obviously he gets himself in a very good position to just close it out a little bit later. Now, these maps are obviously bigger. This is like one of the biggest map pools we've ever had when it comes to the size of the maps. So maybe it's harder for Stats to make timing attacks like that happen. I don't know. Like I think the last game was interesting. There's a lot of ways to look at it. And I think both of them, just like I said, kind of tested the waters. And let's see what happens if I just think what I do is right. I sit back and I build up the units I want to build. Let's see how it plays out. Well, it played out very good for Serral. A little less for Stats. Because one of the things I mentioned as well in the beginning is if you get that many Tempas and then you have a bunch of Archons, nothing is really good against Corruptors. And we saw that in this one fight where 6 Corruptors showed up. There's just nothing you can do to protect those Tempests.
Also, he's so good with Infestors.
Yeah.
I mean, he never overcommits with the fungals. Like, he'll get a fungal off, and he never... Sometimes players dive in with the Infestors, they overextend, and that's what the Protoss wants. But very good with the fungals, and of course, Neural Parasite, he knows exactly how to abuse that. We saw this a couple times in that game where he Neural Parasites the Oracle, and then tags the Protoss' army, and then it gets so much easier to use infestors. I mean, you can see exactly when the corners of the army are exposed, depending on which unit you want to get, and that's when you're trading so effectively. And we saw that shown with the gas as time passed on. Basically, Stats had no gas remaining, whereas Serral was continuing to bank that. And that matters because let's say he loses all his Infestors and Broodlords. Well, then you spend all your gas on Infestors and Broodlords again. The Protoss, if he loses all his gas and can't replenish, he can make, I guess, Zealots and Stalkers, which are bad. So, will Stats avoid the late game? That's what I'm wondering. We're going to the map Thunderbird. Right now, Serral with a 1-0 lead. What is your take, Roddy? Do you think that he's going to avoid late game, or is Stats going to try to make some fixes and maybe play a macro game again?
It's hard on Thunderbird, but I do believe that there is a way to maybe cancel the fourth base. That's the way we've seen a lot of Protoss players approach this match and this matchup on this map in the past. So why not? I think that's kind of what it all boils down to.
Okay, our game has loaded up. The best of 5 with Stats for Serral continues. The winner goes on to face off against Time. All right, game 2 is ready. Let's go. In the upper left, in the red, from Korea, he is
Slice. Stats.
And in the bottom right, in the blue, the former world champion. Here to do it again, he is
Serral.
This is the player who broke the Korean combo. Koreans more dominant in Starcraft than any country is at anything. Serral was the first player to become a non-Korean world champion. And that was a big blow to Korean pride, man. That was the #1 thing on the internet in Korea when that happened. People were shocked. And, there's a lot of pressure actually on the Korean players to kind of fix this. But so far, Serral seems untouchable in-game and, in these interviews, completely unfazed by how hard the Koreans are prepping for this.
Yeah, and he's getting slowly but steady more confident in his interviews as well, right? He's no longer too afraid to make a bold statement. I just want to double down real quick on what you said towards the end of, before we loaded into this game, actually, about the Infestor usage. One thing that really stood out to me, the final moments in that previous game, he neuro-parasites the Prism. I'm like, that's a really good play. But then Stats was already on top of it, so he sends forward a Purification Nova, and Serral immediately cancels the neuro. It's preserving one infested. I'm like, you don't really see it that often. Like, normally they just try to drag it into the Zerg army, and then, okay, if I lose an infested, then it is what it is. Like, no, cancel it immediately, because he's like, nope. At this point, every infestor is so important. I mean, he's just so on point with his unit
I think what you're highlighting there is really emblematic of how perfect Serral's play is, because most players, they get the Warp Prism, which is such a significant unit in a push. That's what allows you to reinforce that. Most players would overextend, maybe freak out and just try to do anything to get it because they finally caught the Warp Prism. But yeah, Serral knows he's ahead. He knows he just has to, continue to not overextend, and that's exactly what he did. And brilliantly done. It's one of the reasons why I worry about Stats in a late game this time around. Now, as far as ideas go here, a lot of similarities coming from Stats. Of course, this Stargate isn't proxied, but we're going to see some Oracles come out, I assume, and try to control the map. And I'm imagining Stats is going to take a third base unless he does something drastic, which we'll see on the production tab.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of one of these maps where you want to go up to 3 bases very quickly. It's so easy to defend your initial 3 bases that you rarely see something odd on Thunderbird. There are simply not too many options on this map. Now, I think the beauty of StarCraft 2 is that a lot of things, like a lot of us, or players, or casters, or fans, we all feel very opinionated about certain things, but none of it is necessarily a fact, right? Like, you can say, like, okay, Zerg is good against Protoss when it goes to the ultra late game. Almost everybody agrees upon that, but what people don't agree upon is, like, what is the ideal way for Protoss to counter it? Like, do you prevent it, or do you build an advantage before that, and what is the ideal unit composition? In the previous game, we saw Stats going into those Tempests very quickly. And I think Tempests are excellent units if you're actually ahead, right? Because if you're actually ahead and Zerg just sits back and then gets their Broodlords, you just wail away at them from a distance. You reveal that army. And I think in even games, or even games where you're slightly behind, that I'm not sure if Tempests are really the units that can bring it back to you.
I'm also curious your thoughts on this, Roddy. It seems like Tempests are better if you're organically closer together. It seems like the further you are apart, the more it can be frustrating to try to control the Tempest there. By the way, as we just saw, 3 kills on the drones, so not as effective as the 5 that were killed at the harass in the last game. Also, this Oracle barely made it out alive, so he's going to have to be careful for that. That's going to be used to try to tag units as the game progresses here. Back at home, we have a Robo coming here, an additional Oracle on the way. Now, on this map, it's pretty easy to just get a third because there's only one entrance point for all 3 bases. So Stats is going to go for a macro game that will most likely go uninterrupted.
What stands out the most for me so far out of Stats' play is that compared to some of...
Nidus.
Yep, indeed. And we have a lot of queens as well. And don't forget that first Oracle took a lot of damage. So Stats will most likely not go back into it. And he lost both adepts. And that's kind of what I want to say, is that he feels a little more reckless than in some of his other games I've seen in the past. Normally I feel he's incredibly patient. Because 2 adepts, I know a lot of people look at it like, well, just try to kill some drones, it's no big deal. It is a big deal because you need the map presence and you need the vision on the other side of the map. And he's just kind of shading him in right now and throwing them away. He flies in. There is no Spore Crawler here, so this is really going to hurt. But this should be a massive tell, because why is there no Spore Crawler, Tasteless?
Because he's Nidusing Roddy in the main, which I don't believe he spotted this at all yet. It was just out of vision. Now, a lot of drones are being killed here, but my God, when these Lings pop out, there's going to be so much damage done over here into the main.
And the Oracle's out of energy. He used almost all of the energy already on the other side of the map to kill drones, to kill even more stuff.
Oh my God, he's abandoning the main. The probes are coming down here. He's rapidly spamming down as much shield batteries as he possibly can.
That's a sick call, by the way, because look at the work count. 50 probes against 27 drones. I think it's an absolutely brilliant call. The biggest problem is that Serral can actually attack that mineral line on the right side from the high ground. I don't think Serral can breach the natural, but what he can do is maybe breach the 3rd base.
Yeah, he can definitely put him on one base, like you said, by controlling the high ground with maybe one queen or something like that over there.
You can shoot at the probes.
Yeah. I'm hoping he's going to get over there. Once they get off creep, it takes him a while. He is going to move the queens back over here to try to peg this expansion over here. And while he's in this position, he can make a second Nidus and cover this.
Oh, that Oracle's actually going to go down because the queens are protecting it. So this is really going to hurt. Uh-oh. And what are the units right now? It's 1 Immortal, 2 Oracles, 5 Sentries.
Took the elevator down here. He's coming through now. The Lings are filtering out. This is actually a pretty decent spot to try to entomb this in force fields, but there's still so much damage happening behind this. I'm not sure the Protoss can hang on.
With 1 battery, I'm not really feeling this fight. More drones going down on the other side of the map, but now Stats is also ending up losing. Look at that Oracle go. There is a Spore Crawler, so that Oracle will fall. Stats goes GG.
Oh my God.
I think there were more Lings in the natural there as well, because Stats suddenly lost 40 workers there.
Even though Serral was running out of workers, remember, the Oracle has to use energy, so you get a little bit of time to remake those drones. That was a nail-biter of a match. Ultimately, with the infrastructure destroyed in the main, and really no defense against the queens and Lings that were already there at not just the 3rd, but Roddy was saying there were Lings in the natural as well. There was no way for Stats to stabilize, and he knew he was going to die. He taps out, giving Serral a 2-0 lead in this best of 5.
I must say the call to sacrifice the main, I think, is brilliant by Stats there. But then he over-invested in defending the natural while not investing enough in defending the 3rd base. With only 1 battery there and like 5 batteries in the natural, if that was slightly more evenly distributed, maybe there is a chance that he can defend both bases. But I gotta say, it's always gonna be very difficult for Stats to defend that base on the right top side, basically his 3rd base. Because how is he gonna do that? There's gonna be a potential of spores and spines as well from the main that can hit his mineral line, and that just makes it a really awkward base to defend at that point.
We're going to map 3. It's on Triton. Stats has to win 3 games in a row, because if Serral takes even 1, he's going on up against time, and that game is loaded up. So let's continue this series onward. In the bottom right in the red, from Korea, our Protoss player. He is
Slice. Stats.
In the blue, our Finnish Zerg player, the Korean combo breaker. He is
And Serral.
So far, so good.
That last game was so sick.
Yeah, that's close. That was actually a lot closer than I think. You look at it in the end, you see all the queens, you see the knights, you're like, oh, that's just an easy victory. But that could have played out in a very different way. Maybe if, if that knight never goes up on the low ground, where he had that oracle trying to cancel it, but the queens are protecting it, if he just prevents that knight from going up, then it's already a lot slower. And Serral was only at 27 drones, so it's really kind of like he's got no time to waste. He has to make magic happen there. And in the end he did, by getting that knight up on the low ground as well. But that was definitely a pretty close match. But so far so good for the defending world champ, 2-0 against the Korean Protoss, who has defeated him twice this year. Well, Serral did not defeat Stats once yet, but obviously this is the most important one.
I'm guessing that Stats is just going to go to Stargate again. I mean, it's the most standard way to play, but I do wonder if he wants to do something completely crazy and off the wall here. Now, we don't really know what would have happened in late game, in Game 2, because we never got there, but that last map does lend itself to macro players. It's one of the reasons why Serral opted to try to go for Nidus play, because that negates the one ramp that you can use to cover all 3 of your bases there. With a Nidus, you still end up with the same problem of having 3 different territories you have to defend. So yeah, let's see what Stats has in mind here.
It's a Twilight opening.
Okay. So not Stargate this time around.
Nope, that's going to be cool. This obviously could go into like a Dark Templar opening with a War Prism and then eventually an Archon drop. Maybe it's something very wild with a couple of Resonating Glaives at depths. Like, I'm personally a big fan of those kind of builds, but they're scary as well, because you can get counted by a million roaches and things can get very dicey. And it's hard to do crazy builds as well, right, when you're down 0-2 in your opening match of the Global Finals. And don't forget that the loser of this series has to go up versus Maru for that tournament live.
I know, it's so crazy. This was already, before our game started today, the group of death, but I think everybody was shocked to see that Time actually played so well against Maru, defeating him there. Serral seems to be ready to move out of this group, but Stats is definitely somebody who's come back from a 0-2 position here. And by the way, this is going to be an Adept rush.
Yep, there we do have that Resonating Glaives. I mean, that's slightly different than a lot of the stuff we normally see. I know this has been getting a little more popular on the European server as well. Wow, that's a lot of gateways. Okay, this is not just one of these openings. You know, the crazy thing is that Serral did not open Overlord Speed on Acropolis.
Yeah.
And then he does do it here on Triton. And I think that Stats is actually very unhappy with this. He's like, why didn't you do this on the first map? There goes the Roach Warren immediately.
Yeah. The problem is, if Serral scouts stuff, he usually runs like a perfect algorithm as far as drone balancing and defensive units like roaches and lings. So Stats, of course, in a perfect world for him, this would have gone undetected until the rush actually started. But I'm a little bit worried here for Stats. I hope this doesn't just get shut down for his sake.
He's not building, I want to say he was not building probes either. Now he does go back to building probes. Now the beautiful thing about adapts is that if you control them nicely, there is always opportunity. There is always a way to deal some damage here and there. But Serral's obviously not going to cut any corners. Will most likely start producing these roaches ASAP. He's already building them, actually. This is so funny because I mentioned this before. One of the weaknesses of Resonating Glaives adapts is that in general you're very susceptible to roach counterattacks. Well, Serral's not tacking up, Tasteless.
No, he's not. Note that the third base has absolutely no drones in it. Serral already gets inside the natural killing probes. The adepts shade in. There's so many queens and more roaches popping out.
Yeah, this is not going to go well for Stats at all, because when you're doing a build like this, you're hoping to deal economic damage, and he's dealing a little bit, but the Lings have dealt even more damage on the other side of the map. These adepts will get cleaned up by the roaches, and Stats needs to start building an Immortal. Otherwise, Tasteless, he's in all the trouble.
Yeah, the adept count is beginning to thin out. We see 11 probes have been killed so far. The drone's now turning to trap the adepts as the last adept goes down. I think we're going to see a counterattack here with these roaches.
He normally should, even though there's still a prism, and it's hard to ignore a prism. It's a little bit scary maybe to send all of your roaches to the other side of the map, but Serral should absolutely send a couple, if you ask me.
Yeah, it looks like instead he's going to play a bit more conservative and just try to keep all this out. Actually, with queens coming out, there's a chance he may just be pulling the trigger in a second here. Again, very good. God, he's so good with his control, man. All right, so he even saves that one drone, getting an extractor there.
I must say, this is crazy, considering the fact that Lings actually did a lot of damage on the other side of the map. Stats is still in a somewhat decent position. Serral felt a little bit indecisive. He's losing more and more mining time over here as well. This War Prism is really hurting Serral at this point.
He's so good. Even we saw the Evo chamber thrown down to save the drone, but also body block the Adepts as well. It's so smart.
I actually kind of like the position of Stats now, though. Imagine if he didn't lose those 8 pros. It would have been amazing. No, the prism! Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I liked it. Before that happened.
It was okay. Past tense.
Yeah.
There's Immortals being made. I don't know that Protoss wants to. Let me just ask you, right? Does Protoss want to go for a third base here, or do you try to get another different type of timing attack?
I think it's so hard to figure out what you're supposed to do after you lose the prism here. And I think it really kind of ruins Stats' abilities to make the right calls as well. Because he was doing fantastic there. He was really keeping Serral busy. He kept all of the roaches of Serral on Serral's side of the map, and he was creating an economic lead for himself.
You know, the problem is that when they're making roaches, the obvious answer is to get Immortals, but you need the Warp Prism if you're going to attack to reinforce. So that means one less Immortal because you're going to have to remake the Warp Prism.
Oh, this is so annoying.
Oh my god.
Both bases, by the way, both potential third bases are getting blocked here. Now the sentries are going to push this Overlord away, but all small things add up in a game of Starcraft 2, and this Nexus could have already been a couple hundred hit points in. And there is the Spire, by the way, that Serral loves so much. If you don't open up Stargate, I'll go Spire.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we see Stargate oftentimes mandatory for standard openings in PvZ is it makes it so the player has to think twice about going mutas. But if you skip it for a rush like this, then the mutas are going to be very strong later on. But I think first and foremost, we want to focus in on this attack that's coming up here, this push that's going northbound right now. Is Serral going to be able to handle this? There's 3 Immortals, a decent number of sentries, which can dice up the army in ways that can get favorable exchanges for the Immortals when paired with the Roaches.
The Ravager count is not that high, though, and it's very important for Serral to get a couple Ravagers out, because obviously they're going to be the ones taking care of force fields. There's a War Prism in the mix once again as well. For now, Stats is just going to pick up 2 Immortals, so he's going to abandon the push. He forced out a couple extra units, he forced out a couple Ravagers, and now he's going to try to maybe make his way into the main base. I thought, but he's just going to clean up creep for now. He doesn't know about that Spire yet, Tasteless.
Okay, Queen getting a little bit lower here. Juggles the Immortals back inside the Warp Prism.
I mean, he's doing a really good job in sniping all these Cryptomas.
Oh my god.
He picked up all the Cryptomas. This is nice and all, but it's much more important that Stats gets vision in the main base of Serral. He needs to see that he's playing against Mutas. Wait, he saw it, but did he actually see it?
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes you can go over it. You might not have actually identified it. We have some Templars coming down here. Storm is on the way, but if a lot of mutas pop out very quickly, it could be difficult for the Protoss to handle. So here are those mutas coming down now. Looks like they're headed towards the mineral area of the third base for Stats.
Okay, we're gonna get an Archon. There's a couple of cannons and a couple of batteries being warped in, so I do have the feeling that he actually acknowledged the fact that there is a Spire. I still feel that the army of Stats right now is very, very inconvenient, to say the least, when it comes to defending against Mutas, right? It's basically this Prism and the Archon. That's good. Everything else is not very good in defending against Mutalisk.
The thing about Archons is that on paper they beat Mutas, but the Mutas don't ever have to engage with them. They can usually outrun them. So I like this idea of having the Warp Prism pick up the Archon so it can get there more quickly to its destination, but the Mutas got in and got out.
Serral's supply just always skyrockets when he does this. Like, he flies in with a couple of mutas, he really doesn't kill that much, and then suddenly you hear Todd in the back of your head, and you're like, look at the supply. You're like, whoa, how does he get 183? 118 army supply. He does this so often, and suddenly attacks Protoss with an insane amount of Roaches, Ravagers, a lot of Banelings in the mix as well, while the Protoss is busy, like, you know, investing in batteries and cannons, and it's like, okay, let's make sure I don't take a lot of damage from the mutas. Suddenly a maxed out Serral shows up, and it is so damn difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Serral gets maxed out, he may just try to pummel the third or even the second base. I think it's just going to depend on what the position to attack in, what Serral identifies as best.
I think he's just going to maybe wait for Baneling speed, right? I think that's an upgrade that you really want to have.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to wait for +1, but definitely Baneling speed. And there's really no reason not to. I mean, you can get maxed out very quickly when you have Roaches, but Roaches are not, the longer and longer the game goes on, Roaches tend to not be the optimal units to have. So we'll probably see a pretty big attack coming in here. There's also, oh my god, nice storm there. There's also a chance we're going to see Stats try to squeeze in a fourth base.
I mean, Serral is now going to queue up his 12 banelings. Serral has been maxed out for a little while. He made a few extra mutas, so they got even more value. That's the 21 extra bane. So maybe he's going to wait for +1, but he's definitely eager to fight. And if you look at the armies, I mean, there was a moment where Serral could have literally attacked with 120 army supply against 60. Now Stats is going to have a little more to work with, but this is still going to be super difficult to deal with for the Protoss.
There's a small number of roaches at the bottom left side of the map that are going to counterattack. The mutas will go inside the main. I'm sorry, I thought that the main army of Serral was going to attack in, and it's instead backed up.
I kind of wonder why Serral has been, it almost feels to me a tiny bit indecisive. Like twice it looked like he wanted to attack and then he didn't. He is stacking up during all of this, but he's also been maxed out for a very long time. And eventually, I mean, Stats is going to get closer and closer to being maxed out as well.
I love how he's abusing the position of these buildings over here. It's just so hard for the Stalkers to actually get up and engage the mutas. And, you know, the mutas, kind of like the roaches, are not that great in endgame ZVP, so he's just going to try to get some value out of them by running through here and taking out probes and anything else he can kill off, like batteries, which we saw earlier. The Greater Spire being on the way signals to us that Serral wants to have the complete picture in the late game here. Here we have the same idea with the roaches, which are also not ideal in the end game, to have them come in here and just do any damage they can do.
Yeah, Stats is just being forced to defend for quite some time now. The muta count not as high as it used to be, but it's still annoying. They can still pick off a couple of probes here and there, and that's exactly what Serral is doing. Serral is building up a massive bank, and slowly but very steadily freeing up a tiny bit of supply for more Corruptors and eventually more Brood Lords, while still getting value out of these units as well. Like, that's, I feel like, the most insane part. How are roaches and mutas still doing stuff when a guy is just sitting at home defending with cannons and batteries?
And he's replacing his army that he's slowly filing off here with Brood Lords, with Corruptors, and continuing to upgrade. While this is going on, Stats has had no opportunities to contest the creep on the map, so the right side is completely covered in creep. And I think he's going to continue to do that here. Now, there is a possibility, I don't know that it's going to happen, but there is a possibility, since the way this map is shaped, that Stats plays a very long and dramatic defensive game where Serral ends up mining out more of the map. And maybe Stats trades more efficiently. But we've already seen how good Serral is in the end game as it is. So I think we're about to see the first major attack. The Banelings are going to go for the counterattack coming in here.
Uh-oh. These Banes are actually going to connect with all of these Zealots. A couple of Banelings do survive. I'm a bit worried here because Stats is not maxed out yet. He's got no bank, and he's stepping onto creep. I think he's trying to hit a pre-Broodlord timing, but he's in for a rough surprise because Broodlords are already done, and his army is not very good against Broods, but maybe with the best Storms ever, there is some magic possible.
We see the army being pulled away here. The Storm's continuing to blanket this area as the Stalkers and Archons might try to push forward to get under these Broodlords, but it just seems like the army here of Serral is too much.
And I mean, the longer this goes, the worse it gets. Serral fires up 94 Zerglings, 14 more Banelings on the way as well, just making it almost impossible for Stalkers to even think about blinking forward and trying to get in range of these Broodlords. 11 Broods against 18 Stalkers. This is not looking good for Stats at all.
Stats goes for the dive here, trying to get under those Broods, but it is punished heavily. Storm's coming down, annihilating these Zerglings. Is this enough, though? Banelings coming as well. And I think Stats might be able to seesaw this back onto the creep.
I mean, Stats actually did really good there, because the entire bank of Serral is gone. The biggest problem is, can he do it one more time? Because now he's out of Storms as well. There are 9 Broodlords. Can Stats pull off a miracle here? Can he pick off these 9 Broodlords?
He's coming in now. The Broodlords are taking damage. They do retreat onto the high ground as more Links come in here. The Archons with their shields getting lower. It's now just Immortals and Stalkers and Sentries.
He blinks forward one more time, but now the Queens are here to save the day as well. GG gets called, and Serral takes the 3-0 victory.
Dude, he's so good. He's so good. Serral, the king of Zerg, just played a beautiful series there. And, I mean, Stats was really good, to be honest. I don't want us to leave this thinking that Stats was bad in any way, but Serral just, he has an answer for everything.
I really wonder how this final game plays out if Stats didn't